Fancy. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy Booktube hats, and today I'm doing another Booktube SFF Babbles video. These are video prompt topics that are set for certain days as part of the Booktube SFF Awards. I will leave the link to the Goodreads group for the Booktube SFF Awards down below so that you can find out about future topics and also join in with the read-alongs that are going on right now if you want to. But today's topic is underrated SFF. Now, a couple months ago, there was a Top 5 Wednesday video for Top 5 Underrated Books, and I did that video and all 5 books on my list were fantasy. So I'm going to link that video for you and consider it part 1 of something for which this is part 2. I'm going to be following basically the same rules I set for myself in that video. To put together that list, what I did was I took my Goodreads Red Shelf, sorted them by number of Goodreads ratings, and picked the top 5 with the fewest ratings that were, number 1, books that I had rated 4 stars or higher. They ended up all being 4-star ratings. These are also all going to be 4-star ratings. Apparently I don't have super underrated 5-star books that fit all of my criteria. 2, I required that they be full-length works, because I wanted to focus on full-length books. And 3, I discounted anything that was a second book or later in a series. Books that are further on in series always have fewer ratings than books that are earlier on in series, but I didn't want to recommend a book that was later on in a series in isolation. So again, a recap of the books that were in that first video. I'm going to link it for you. I think it's probably a more interesting list than part 2 is going to end up being here, so if you haven't seen that, I'm going to highly recommend it. Mortal Fire by Elizabeth Knox with 603 ratings. The Phoenix Dance by Dia Calhoun with 535 ratings. Digger, the Complete Omnibus by Ursula Vernon with 407 ratings. Life Load by Jo Walton with 238 ratings. The Mountain of Kept Memory by Rachel Neumeyer with 113 ratings. That's the number of ratings those books have now, not necessarily what they were when I filmed that video 2 months ago. So if that was my top 5 underrated SFF, then this is going to be my top 6 through 10 underrated SFF. These are all going to be at under 800 Goodreads ratings. I'm going to go from most ratings to least ratings. Several of these are books that I have read since I did my last list, so there's at least one of them that would have made it onto that list if I had read it at the time, just numerically speaking. So I'm going to get right into it. The first book I have on this list is Fudoki by Kij Johnson. This was the first book that I did a full review of on my channel, so I'll link that. And I've talked about it in a couple other videos since, I think, in my historical fiction video. This has 766 Goodreads ratings. This is primarily, I would say, a historical fiction novel that has a fantasy element in the secondary storyline. This is a very contemplative book that follows an aging princess in the Heian period in Japan who's very ill and dying, and she starts to write a story about a cat who's transformed into a woman and goes on a journey to the farthest reaches of Japan. This story becomes a way for the princess to process the things that she's learned about human nature over the course of her own life. If you'd like to learn more, you can check out the other videos where I've talked about this. I'll leave links. So the next book on this list is one I got from the library. It's a graphic novel. It's Cursed Pirate Girl, Volume 1 by Jeremy A. Bastian with 759 ratings. I haven't read a ton of graphic novels, and the ones I've really enjoyed have tended to be fairly unusual ones. This is a kind of nautical, piratical portal fantasy about a girl who heads off to find her father, who's a pirate captain in this fantasy pirate land. The most notable thing about it is how intricately it is drawn. The visuals are just over the top and it's crazy whimsical. I loved it. The downside, though, is that the author/artist works very, very slowly, so it's probably going to be a very long time until something like Volume 2 emerges. The last 3 books on this list are all 2016 releases that I read in February. So newer releases tend to have fewer ratings if people haven't read them yet, but that's kind of exactly what Booktube is here for, to signal boost books that we think more people should be reading. But because these are all in my February wrap-up, which I have filmed, but I have not yet edited. That's going to be the next video I upload in the next couple days or so. So in the interest of not sounding like a broken record in several videos in a row, I'm going to be very brief with these and focus not on the content of the book, but more on its underratedness. These are all books I've mentioned in other videos before, and if you want to stick around a couple days, you should be seeing a February wrap-up with more info on all of these books. So the next book on this list is Arabella of Mars by David D. Levine with 654 ratings. I was really surprised at how few Goodreads ratings this book has, because I've actually seen a good deal of hype about it on Booktube. So I assumed, I guess, that this book was far more popular than it is, broadly speaking. And that is really a shame, because I think this is a book that should have massive broad appeal, especially among people who like fun SFF adventures, who like to read YA adult crossover books. This is just one of those books where it seems really unfair that its popularity is right now seems to be confined to a niche area of Booktube SFF. Regency alternate history with space travel and girls on adventures. What more do you need? Next, I've got a middle grade book, which is The Secret Horses of Briar Hill, with 615 ratings. I listened to this on audiobook CD. Now, I'm not totally certain that number of Goodreads ratings is any sort of accurate indicator of the popularity of a middle grade book, given that the target audience of middle grade is possibly too young to be on Goodreads in great numbers. But nevertheless, I thought this was a book that is definitely sophisticated enough to have more of an adult following than it seems to have. I think this is a layered and nuanced story. It is a tearjerker. It is hard-hitting and tragic at times. It follows children in a tuberculosis hospital during World War II in England. So there's some real tragedy in this. And the main character, Emmeline, can see winged horses in the mirrors of the hospital. It's also quite short, so if this is a book that interests you but you're on the fence, it's not that long to read, it's not that long to listen to on audio. And then the last book I have here is A Green and Ancient Light by Frederic S. Durbin with 546 ratings on Goodreads. This is another World War II fantasy novel with a child protagonist. These two books keep coming up in the same videos for me because I basically read them back to back. So comparisons are natural. This one isn't specifically marketed for kids. I interpret it more as an adult book, although it would be appropriate for all ages. This is about a boy who spends a summer with his grandmother during the war that ends up being sort of a turning point in his life, in his growing up process. I think that it's possible that the personal and historical aspects of this book are stronger than the fantasy element, which might be why it hasn't gotten a ton of attention. I feel like only hardcore SFF fans know about this book, and maybe that's not the best target audience for it. That's pure speculation on my part, though. But I thought this book was rather lovely. So those are 5 more books that I think deserve more attention than they've gotten. I guess they're all fantasy, except Arabella of Mars is technically like steampunk alt history. Anyways, I think my first video was a slightly more eclectic mix, so if you want more, please check that out. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought. Let me know if any of them were also on your list. I promise you I'll have that February wrap-up for you ready soon. I'm just really intimidated to edit it because I have like an hour and a half of footage and I'm concerned that I may not have actually ended up saying any of the things I wanted to say in all of that time. So it'll be interesting to edit. Anyhow, that is all. Bye for now.